Hey y'all, it's Miss Welch. This video is going to cover skin color. So we're going to look at the cellular level of skin color and the genetics behind it, as well as the effects of the environment, our daily activities, and disorders that can all affect your skin color. So let's get started. This is a diagram of the epidermis of both a dark-skinned and a light-skinned individual. So let's look at it from the bottom up. Remember that the stratum basal at the bottom of the epidermis is where we have the created melanocytes. And melanocytes are those cells that create melanin, our pigment for coloration. And if you could look at this on the cellular level, you would see that we actually have about the same number of melanocytes, no matter what your skin color is. However, the production levels are what are determined genetically. So for a dark-skinned individual, you see all these little dots of melanin where these melanocytes are producing much more quantities of melanin. And then as that is taken up in the keratinocytes, it is pushed outward toward the upper levels of the epidermis. And so you can see those all throughout. The light-skinned individual can't even see any polka dots, right? The melanin is produced in much smaller quantities, and so there's not as much getting up, and that changes the coloration of our skin. Now, there's actually two types of melanin. There's eumelanin, that's spelled EU melanin, and there's faux melanin, PHEO melanin. Got to spell them crazy. The eumelanin is actually the darker pigment, and faux melanin is more of a reddish yellow type color. These are the two melanins that also are present in our hair to give our hair color. And so you see a lot of eumelanin produced by people that have darker skin tones, and then you see a lot of faux melanin, that reddish yellow, in the lighter skin tones. Especially think about our redheads. They have a lot of that faux melanin both as skin coloration and hair coloration. There's actually some research, looking into the effects of those and their protective qualities or lack thereof. The eumelanin is a lot better at protecting against skin cancer and that UV radiation. However, eumelanin can also block vitamin D production or activation. So there's some trade-offs there based on biology with those two types of melanin. But either way, it's the quantity of melanin produced that creates that skin coloration. Now, of course, we know that environment plays a role in this too. The more you're exposed to sun, the more melanin you produce, because melanin is protective against UV rays. Your body knows, hey, I'm being bombarded by UV light, whether that's sunshine, whether it's tanning beds, and your body tries to make more melanin to protect against it. So even an individual can have a range of coloration over the course of a year based on their activity level, their environment. So this is called a multifactorial trait. So multifactorial genetic traits are ones that are influenced by both the genetics and the environment. It's also polygenic, or many genes. For a long time, they've said that there's at least 100 genes that interact to create your skin color. Now there may be as many as 400 or more genes that have been located that all interact to create our skin colors. So we don't look like Crayola crayons where there's only 4 or 5 shades. We look like the spectrum. Now, there are several disorders of melanocytes that can affect skin pigmentation. So the first one you're probably familiar with is albinism. So people who are albino have melanocytes that cannot produce melanin. And so that's a genetic trait, right? They're born with it. And they then therefore lack that pigmentation. And so both hair and skin and even eyes can be white or pale or even a reddish pink color because you see blood vessels instead of the eumelanin and faux melanin coloration from the melanin. Another one is vitiligo, which is described or shown here in this picture. Vitiligo is where you probably were making pigment, but those melanocytes lost the ability. They think it may be an autoimmune reaction. So you have patches of skin that even though maybe they used to make melanin, they don't now, and so you come with those lighter patches of lighter skin, and you still have darker skin where your cells are making the correct amount for your genetics and your body. So this can progress over time. Someone with vitiligo can have an increased amount through their life, and it can extend. A good example is Michael Jackson, if you remember that he was affected by vitiligo. Different disorders, different activities of the body can all cause temporary coloration changes and some that are permanent. And so let's talk through the rainbow, talk through all the colors, and see what changes in skin can cause each of these different colorations. All right, so let's start with the color red, right? The rainbow is Roy G. Biv. Red's the first color. So how does our skin turn red? Well, just like this guy here, if you get angry, right, you get all red in the face, you get upset. Why does your face turn red when you're angry or embarrassed or blushing? Well, it's blood vessel dilation. The blood vessels closer to the surface are dilating and bringing that warm, hot blood from deeper in closer to the surface, and you see that increased dilation and increased blood flow in the tissues. You know, people that it just seems like doesn't take very much at all for them to turn red, right? Some of us have more capillaries closer to the skin. Sometimes with our paler complexions, that redness shows through a lot easier than someone who has a darker skin tone. So red is often a color associated with emotion, also with temperature, right? If you are red, it may be because you're hot. So your blood vessels have dilated to try to speed the flow through the tissues so that you can evaporate the heat off faster. And open those blood vessels up so they can have increased volume and get the blood flowing to the surface to try to cool, so away from the depths to cool down. So red is definitely highly correlated, whether it's emotional or temperature, to blood vessel dilation. All right, so let's look at the next color, orange. Now that's not a common skin color, but you can see in this picture, there's someone with a normal skin coloration, and then this hand has a more orangey yellow tint. And that's because of beta carotene overload. So beta carotene is a reddish yellow pigment found in things like carrots and sweet potatoes, pumpkins, those orange colored vegetables. And your body can turn beta carotene into vitamin A, which you need for your eyesight and other things. Well, you can eat too much and you can turn orangey looking. Now, this is more common in children than adults, but it can happen either way. Think about this scenario where a mom is feeding a new baby baby food, and the baby takes a bite of peas and spits it out, and takes a bite of green beans and spits it out, but those orange ones, those carrots, those sweet potatoes, those are sweeter. Those taste better. And so if the baby eats a lot of those orange colored baby foods, then it can build up the pigment in their system. And then mom is freaking out that baby is turning orange. So you often see this in moms bringing frantic, babies to the doctor's office because of that skin coloration change. Now, our next color, yellow, is really hard to distinguish from orange, but when we say yellow, a lot of times we're talking about jaundice. So jaundice is caused by liver failure. So the liver helps break down red blood cells into its pigment formations of bilirubin and biliverdin. So bilirubin is a yellowy colored pigment, and if you cannot break down it properly, then that yellow pigment is out in your bloodstream and gets into your tissues, and you have a buildup of bilirubin, and it causes you to look more yellow. You see it in the whites of the eyes, because that coloration right there, that white is very pale and it picks up the yellow and you can see it. Now, this is common in babies because the liver's not fully functioning yet. The baby has not had to process any waste products in utero. The mom's blood takes care of that through the placenta. So the baby's liver is just cranking and getting ready to go, and sometimes that is a slow process, and so often newborns will have jaundice and will need some help. Now, interestingly enough, UV light can also help break down the pigment, so taking the baby out into the sun can help with getting rid of that waste product faster. That's how it was discovered. A nurse took babies in the hospital with jaundice outside for walks and was observant enough to realize that the ones that went outside got better faster. And that spurred the whole research that made it possible for us to use those Billy lights, those UV lights in the hospital that they put the babies under to help that UV light help break down the bilirubin faster so the baby would not have jaundice. Green is a color we probably don't have a lot of examples for, except we sometimes talk about people looking a little green when they're nauseous, or green with jealousy. A little tinge of color there, but we really don't have a lot of good examples of green, except maybe if you're in an infection, right? So someone who has gangrene or has pus or something like that, you may see some green if there was infected tissue. Blue. There's several things that can cause our tissues to look blue. One of those is cyanosis. Cyanosis means it looks blue or cyan, and that can be caused by lack of oxygenation. And so if you see these fingertips here looking kind of blue, a lot of times oxygenation is shown first in the periphery. So that's one clue that your body is not getting enough oxygen, is if your fingertips or toes are blue, because your body's hoarding it toward the center where the vital organs are, and lets the end of the fingers go. Blue could also be cold, right? So it could be that your tissues are cold. You've been outside in the snow, and that is due to blood vessel constriction. So with the cold temperatures, your blood vessels have constricted, the opposite of the red with dilation. Again, because you're trying to bring your heated blood deeper into the body, deeper into the tissue to conserve it and to protect the most important parts. Your body would much rather protect your vital organs than it would your fingers and toes. Now, there's another very interesting cause of blue skin that's genetic, and this is methemoglobinemia. It's a problem with the hemoglobin in your blood. And so this family, this painting is of the blue Fugits from Troublesome Creek, Kentucky. We don't have very much in terms of records, but we have a lot of the history of this family. What happened was in the 1800s, a boy with blue skin was left at an orphanage. And when he grew up, he moved to Kentucky and married a woman, and crazy chances, she was not blue skinned, but she had the recessive gene for the same disorder. So 1,000,000,000 to 1 chance they get married. They live in a small place in eastern Kentucky. There's only like 4 families in the area. And so everybody's related to everybody else and marries relatives because they're staying in this community. And so the gene is very concentrated for this disorder. So there are multiple people born with this blue skin because of a disorder with hemoglobin. So they kind of stay themselves, they stay secret, and over the years, a doctor in Kentucky in the 1950s and 60s hears about it, and he's a hematologist. It's super interesting, so he moves out there and finally, over the years, tracks down the family and does the blood work and figures out what the problem is. And he can actually give them an injection or a pill of methylene blue that turns their pigment back pink because it fixes the enzyme they're missing in their blood. So it's a really interesting story. It's a genetic disorder. There's been some reports that of maybe in Alaska of another indigenous population that this cropped up in, but definitely not common. But if you want an interesting story to read about genetics, check out the blue Fugits of Troublesome Creek, Kentucky. All right, well, that covers a lot of different skin colorations and their causes. There's a ton more out there, so if this interests you, I encourage you to research more about both temporary and permanent, environmental and genetic and disorder type things that can change our skin color. Thanks for watching.